Exasperated by the contradictory public and private positions of the British government, a former Derry priest who, along with others, was acting as an intermediary between London and the IRA, decided to reveal to Hume the full extent of the talks.
We made a decision that Hume was the only person who could become the natural political leader of this situation, that there were negotiations between the British and the IRA, that the Irish were now beginning to negotiate with the IRA, because the British had told us. It was time for all this back-channel stuff to stop, that this had to go out into the mainstream of politics, that this was where the next natural stage was going to go, and that Hume had to lead it and take that charge, and he had to take the Adams and the McGuinnesses of this world with him. Now, they think they heap him with praise, but they don't remember that they nearly broke him during those 9 months.
Finally, in August 1994, Hume got his hands on the prize. The IRA and Loyalist ceasefires ended a generation of violence and ultimately led to the Good Friday Agreement. Hume's decision to talk to Adams had broken the political stalemate. But it would come at great cost to his party and to his own health.
Mrs. Connahan lives in the terraced houses of Ann Street, and they don't amount to much. But they are enough to show what's wrong in this divided city. Protestants, in the minority, call it Londonderry, and most of them vote Unionist. Catholics, in the majority, call it Derry, and most of them vote Nationalist. Ann Street is all Catholic.
I fought for 18 years in the army for liberty and freedom. But simply because I'm a Catholic, I cannot get freedom.
To understand Hume, you have to understand he was born into a community that were essentially the losers in the accommodation that happened between London and Dublin after the War of Independence. He found the nationalist community had sort of two reactions to that situation. One was the abstentionism of the Nationalist Party. The other was the militancy of the IRA, I suppose, what biologists would call fight or flight. And Hume knew instinctively, and indeed from observation as well, that neither of these approaches was going to be really productive. And single-handedly, he set about creating and defining a middle ground.
John Hume's first calling was to the priesthood. But having gained his degree at Maynooth College outside Dublin, he returned home to become a teacher.
He taught me for 2 years. He came at it in a way that was provocative to me, in that he challenged me. One of my big memories is that he made us debate quite a lot. And one of the debates he made us do was that we were to debate that nationalists should join the Unionist Party and transform it from within. Now, that was kind of like mind-blowing to someone like me.
Allied to unemployment, housing is one of Derry's root problems. The key factor in political control in Derry has always been housing and the allocation of housing, and over the years this has been controlled by the party in power.
Hume began drawing attention to the injustices he saw around him in Derry. He wrote newspaper articles, and already aware of the growing power of television, he helped produce 2 documentaries.
Derry in those days was in a very, very distressed state. The housing situation was appalling. You could find houses with 30 people, 35 people, all in one house, with one toilet in the back. In this film, he talked about the two traditions coming together, and it would only be when the two traditions came together that Derry would reach its full potential.
The two traditions must meet. Derry has no future unless there is a change in the minds and hearts of people, for Derry is the mother of us all.
The poverty in Derry moved Hume and a number of others to set up the first ever financial cooperative in Northern Ireland.
I think a credit union movement, for example, is an ideal vehicle to spread a spirit of self-help in the community, because it can involve the whole community at every level.
I knew how difficult life in poverty was for people, because they couldn't borrow money, so they had to go to pawn shops and put their goods, etc., into it. And of course, if they got loans of money, it was very highly costly. And so I thought the credit union movement was the right answer for dealing with that.
My first memory of John Hume is as a teenager. I think I was about maybe 13 or 14. My grandmother had taken me to a public meeting to do with this radical new idea called a credit union. And I listened while this man, whom I didn't know was going to become the John Hume of the future in terms of the much broader political stage, while this then still relatively young man explained to us what seemed almost an exotic concept at that time, the idea of people power.
Hume helped set up credit unions across Northern Ireland. And for a time, unionists in Derry welcomed his leadership abilities as he led a campaign to bring Northern Ireland's second university to the city.
The one wonderful thing about the University for Derry campaign was that it brought all the citizens of the city together. There was a huge motorcade to Stormont to protest against the decision to place the university in Coleraine. He was the chairman of that committee, and that kind of catapulted him into being the spokesperson for the city.
I want them to show that law is fair, which it isn't at the moment. I want them to grant us our one man, one vote. I want them to end gerrymander.
On the streets of Derry, there was growing agitation at unionist intransigence. The protesters were inspired by uprisings around the world. Hume drew his influence from the leader of the civil rights movement in America.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
It was really in my 20s when I started to figure out this force of nature that lived so close by, really. Ironically, it was after studying the non-violence of Dr. King in the civil rights movement in the US, which I'd been reading on, and I was talking about Martin Luther King with somebody, and they said, Martin Luther King lives in your country right now, and he's, you know, still there. And I said, you mean John Hume? And they said, yes, of course. Just as courageous, just as strategic, just as vital for peace.
Free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Watching those people, their calm dignity and their courage,